Hello, Guy Glidden here, and I'm providing the fourth in a set of screencasts that are designed to help you with the complex assignments of this course, Contemporary Philosophic Views of Education. For this one, the topic is on the worldview, and this is the final writing assignment of the class. I've identified this as probably the most demanding assignment of the class, so we'll probably be talking about this further, and I hope you will give me some questions, but this should start the ball rolling. So we're going to focus today on the image of the final document. What should it look like? We're going to be talking about the development of a systematic process, and I'm going to be focusing really on the role of documentation. Now, again, this is simply to tell you what these four screencasts are so that you can check on your notes to see that you have all four of them. Again, for all four, you're getting a screencast, but you also have an independent set of PowerPoint notes. So make sure you use all the resources that you have access to in completing the assignments. As with common with the other assignments, I want you to focus on the rubric questions, and there are 5 rubric items and questions for this assignment. First of all, I'm looking for an essay that's creative and individualized. In other words, is it really you that we're looking at, or could we get the same thing by simply going to a Wikipedia listing in the internet? So I'm looking to see that this is something that's personalized for each person. Obviously, I want to make certain that you're reflecting on a combination of readings, discussions, and experiences, and this includes your own personal experiences because it is your worldview. Obviously, I want something that's very clear and it's an effective communication tool, so that probably might be something to really underline. If you don't do that, it's pretty hard to be successful in the other 4. Again, looking at the essay, I'm going to be asking you the question, and after I've read it, does it seem to demonstrate awareness of some philosophic content and ideas? So when you pledge your course for certain philosophic concepts or belief systems, can I see evidence that you have a pretty good, clear picture of what those are? And then there's a bibliographic expectation here, and the expectation is simply this, that I want 10 citations. So we'll talk about that and show you an example of how that fits together. Let's go to the steps. First thing you need to do is you need to do some reflection and preparation before you start writing. So focus on, as a starting spot, focus on your personal philosophy. In other words, gather the information that you know about your beliefs and your philosophy as you've stated it before, as you've expressed it. The personal philosophy that you, for me in this class, would be an example. I would also encourage you to look at the inventory results that you did. Any other evidence that you have said this is a pretty strong indication of my beliefs. Now, lots of us have beliefs that are important to us, but sometimes I encourage people to stack them up against each other. So when we look at the beliefs that are most important, or if you were going to rank order the things that you say, these are really important to me, these are non-negotiable beliefs, what's at the top of your list? So you need to be looking at that and trying to get that lined up. And particularly think about the idea of how do your beliefs, are they consistent throughout your life? But do you have one philosophy that seems to follow you at the workplace, and another one that follows you at the home, and another one that follows you in the community? So check on that. Okay, look for the genesis of your ideas. So where did they come from? Where did they originate? What's the basis of your thinking? We'll get some examples of that. And then look at examples and illustrations of living your worldview. So if you say that these beliefs are important to me, how would we know it? By looking at how you live or how you conduct yourself as a parent, as a person, as a teacher or a worker. Well, how would you put that together? Let's look at the issue of sources and reference, because that's kind of important. And usually when I say 10 citations, people kind of freak out at that, but you don't need to. Because almost everything that we have in our belief system is a part of our learning process, and I say learning process in a long-term process, because I'm not a young person. I still consider myself to be changing and learning. Now, of course, I did a lot more learning when I was younger. So I would go back and I would simply, one of the questions I might ask would be, where did my influences, the people who influenced me, get their ideas? So if I think my parents were an important part in my development of my belief system, where did they get their ideas? What did they read? What were they, what source documents would they be important? Very small snippet, not unlike what you might say. I grew up in a rural community. It had a very strong religious orientation. It was a very strong rural Protestant community with a lot of people with Scots, Irish, and English backgrounds. It would be safe to say that probably the single most important influence for many of these people over their lifetimes was probably the King James Version of the Bible. Now, I won't go into that in detail, but you can see how that developed their thinking in a lot of different ways. So, what was my learning process? What were the things that influenced me in my life? Where did my influences get their ideas? What was the basis? And then look for readings and source documents and create an audit trail. Go back to that sources and influence, give you again a very brief snippet of an example. Recently I was in Washington, D.C., and I visited the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. Very impressive, very solemn item. But we were very clearly shown that if you're going to understand the ideas of Martin Luther King Jr. and the influence that he had on the civil rights movement, you really need to read the ideas of Gandhi, the really father of the Indian independence movement, in his ideas of passive resistance, the idea of being able to resist in a non-confrontational or violent way. So that's just an example. You couldn't write a paper on Martin Luther King Jr., at least a well-documented paper, without reading something from Gandhi first. That would be my view. Example of the process we're talking about. Then we're getting ready to the idea of organizing writing. So I think when you get together here and you look at your beliefs, your background ideas, where they come from, look at some examples and illustrations, look at some of the sources of information that people have, you're going to find out that you probably have more than you can possibly use. So that means that organization and focus are going to be important. Because the point of this paper is not to write everything you know. Length is not the factor. I want a focused, organized paper that addresses the questions of the rubric with good, clear documentation. Now let me provide a couple, and I will tell you that I'm going to make notation of 2 examples. Both of these examples are going to be posted in Moodle. So let me just kind of look quickly here and focus here on example number 1. And I think you can see that. Probably can't see it well because it's a little bit smaller than I'd like. But the reason I'm bringing this one up is that example 1, and I'll blow this up for you, is not very well done. And you can read it for yourself and see what you think. And I'll tell you why. The paper is organized into a number of brief paragraphs, and each paragraph provides a very bit of superficial information, a snippet of information on a different school of philosophy. So for example, this person says, well, you know, I have become more of a progressivist the longer I teach. Then the person provides one very brief sentence about progressivism and then moves on. And I could repeat that the same thing with the behaviors approach. The behaviors approach could be an example of learning. okay, and the person provides a little snippet of information. Nothing is discussed in detail, no detailed information, none of the ideas or development. It doesn't say anything about the worldview of the writer. I could have gotten the same information by simply going to a listing in Wikipedia. It's not personalized at all. There's no information about the about readings and awareness of the readings on the part of the writer. So the little brief snippets of information wouldn't require much, wouldn't be much of a demonstration of knowledge on that person's part. And although there were 10 sources were identified, that were cited, there was a little demonstration in the paper that the information was listed. It's almost as though the sources were listed, and there they are. You can see lots of sources there. But like, you had to say, where did that person actually use that information? And finally, it simply isn't very well written, and I'd probably need to focus on that. It wasn't very much fun to read. I didn't really enjoy it. So that would be one example. Let's go on to another example quickly here, because I want to, and again, this one will be focused. This is an example of a carefully done worldview, and a few things that I've noted. Number one, when you read it, you'll see it's enjoyable to read. It has a theme, it follows through. The person talks about her experiences as an undergraduate at Newman and how the person learned from the conceptual framework, which is an important part of the program at Newman, how that influenced her life. It has a personality. It's clear that it's written by one person and that person's unique statement. The items that were cited in the bibliography can clearly be traced to the content within the paper. So when I went down and looked at a citation, like this one right here, here's one where she actually cited, which is legitimate to do, summer notes from Guy Glidden, summer of 2012 class notes. Well, I was able to go back up, and here it is. Here's a quote that Guy Glidden actually made in class. So I can say, yeah, I did that. So again, clear documentation. Now again, paper's not long. The person didn't really write a ton of stuff on that, but I want you to look at those two examples and give some illustration. So, in short, this is an experience that's going to require you to do some organization, develop an image of the final product, think in terms of a systematic process, and incorporate the role of documentation within your process. If you do that, I think you get off to a good start. Thank you very much.